Serious, tattoo artists, what was your worst mistake and how did the client react? I had a client who decided he wanted lettering on his forearms. Sayings in Greek and Hebrew. He doesn't speak either language. But he had one of his friends double check the spelling before he sent the references to me. Came in. We did the tattoos. Pretty simple appointment. Fast forward to a couple weeks later. I get a message from my client about the tattoo that was done in Hebrew. He owns a small construction restoration company. And has a few Israeli guys who work for him. Apparently, they were giving him a lot of shti for his Hebrew tattoo. He originally thought they were just messing with him. Because it was spelled wrong. The font he had chosen off a quick Google search essentially changed a couple of the letters. Kinda like the difference between an F and a T. Making it a completely different word. We ended up being able to fix it pretty easily and had a good laugh about it. But definitely beware when you're getting tattoos in a language you and your artist don't speak. So I didn't mess up, but I had a client scare me. I was tattooing his sister's name on him. She passed away. Gabriella with one L in it. Past the point of no return, he asks me, there's two L's. Right? I think I had a heart attack. And he started laughing. He thought it was hilarious. A few years ago I was tattooing a client who had apparently lost a bet. His buddies were allowed to tattoo something behind his shoulder as long as it wasn't racist or offensive. Turns out the guy drew up a design of a leprechaun throwing up on a book. Sure. Why not? Everyone was sober and they were paying pounds up front. Easy work. The drawing was really simple and the shading was easier than I thought it'd be. Turns out everyone liked it. Except the guy with the tattoo of a leprechaun throwing up on a book. He picked at the scab. Trying to get rid of it. Completely took it from bad to worse. Comes in about 10 days later. Demanding a refund of money he didn't pay or the studio. Not me. Cover it up. Nope. Management said you signed for it in your right mind and then damaged it yourself. Personally, I was yelled at and told never to tattoo anyone like that. It only works in television series or film. Did I make a mistake? Yes and no. The lesson here is don't get involved in others' drama when permanent body marking are involved. My only spelling mistake ever was in Italian. Girl wants a phrase in Italian. She writes it down no less than 5x on a paper. I tell her to make sure it is correct. I don't speak Italian. She insists it is correct. I draw up some nice script. Tattoo it with no issues. Bandage. Pay and she leaves. She comes back in hysterical and tells me I spelled it wrong. I hadn't thrown out the paper. I spelled it exactly how she spelled it. I asked what she wanted to do. And she decided no one I know speaks Italian. That was about 15 years ago. I often wonder if she ended up getting it covered up. Worked as a pisser in a shop a decade ago. A guy came in and wanted Murphy's Law. The artist free-handed a design on him. He greenlit it after watching in the mirror and they did the beautiful piece with a banner saying Murphy's Law. Seemed fitting. The guy loved the fact that his one messed up tattoo was the Murphy's Law one. Edit. Some people have pointed out the lack of apostrophe in the spelling. This took place in a small Swedish town and 100% there was no apostrophe. Swedes are generally decent at English. But apostrophe to indicate ownership is probably the part we suck most at. I was working at a place when a guy came in for a full back piece of 3 different cars. It took like 4 visits to finish and each visit he'd look at it and say it looks awesome and then he would take off. On the last visit, they call me in to look at it to show me how awesome it turned out. Well, all the steering wheels were on the wrong side and the reason no one caught it was because the dude was looking in a mirror to check his progress so they looked correct. I'm pretty sure the guy was super chill about it when they offered a bunch of free work and they fixed it in another session. Well, they'd be on the correct side for some parts of the world. I was a receptionist at a tattoo shop. One of the artists misspelled neighborhood on this guy's neck. He spelled it neighborhood, leaving out the first H. Neighborhood was the guy's nickname. It was a pretty large, elaborate tattoo so there was no fixing it. I don't think I have ever cringed so hard in my life. The guy was surprisingly really cool about it. He did see the drawing and approved it before it was tattooed on. He ended up making the artist tattoo a H on his palm, so if anyone gave him shit about the misspelling he could smack that person with the missing H. I tattooed Philippines for 13 instead of Philippians for 13 on a girl one time. Removed. I gave a guy a tattoo in prison of his girlfriend's name on his arm. I knew him on the street and his girl and knew it was going nowhere. And insisted he change his mind. He didn't. So I made a bet with him that he was gonna go belly up within 6 months. When we got out of segregation and back onto the yard, a few weeks passed at most, and I can see him having a bad conversation on the phone. He called me over to his cell and offered me up a huge f-king sack of commissary without a word. I didn't take it. Figured he needed it more than me. Still feel like shitty to this day. Edit. I thought I was gonna get dragged, but you motherfuckers are supportive as hell. Living out here is f-king hard. And every time I go to bed I dream about being inside again. I saw a psychologist like 2 weeks ago and she said I am showing classic signs of PTSD and institutionalization. I keep putting off my follow-up appointments, but I'm gonna reschedule. Thank you all. My ex did a large scarification on the client's abdomen. The client had brought in a piece of paper with the stylized word perseverance. I was invited in midway to see the progress and had to tap my ex on the shoulder for a spelling lesson. I was doing a big old tattoo of Cringer, Aka Battle Kit, on a really cool client's leg. I got so into doing this big, awesome tiger head that I forgot that it wasn't a goddamn tiger and colored the stripes black. I realized about a third of the way through filling them in and let the guy know. He was disappointed, but mostly okay with it. I felt like I was going to puke. I finished the thing feeling so f-king sick and then refused payment. Man. Going from that feeling of elation to immediate crushing disappointment was hard to shake. And kind of dazed me. It was extra crushing because it was a fun tattoo during a time when I wasn't that busy and was doing mostly absolute dreck. The payment was just the icing on the top. So letting that go was hard too. Ugh. Just thinking about it now is making me feel sick. Dude, I would try not to beat yourself up too bad. The fact it still bothers you shows you're totally a good person. Besides, even if he was bummed out initially, I'm sure he managed to accept it eventually. I was working at a shop in Nick. This very heavy set gentleman came in and wanted a full back piece. No other tattoos. The design was very elaborate and quite good. Once it was all approved, the tattoo stencil was applied. And again approved by the client. I wasn't doing the tattoo, but I was occasionally checking in on the process. Once the line work was done, his shading had begun. I noticed something horrible. The stencil was applied over his rolls of skin on his lower back. I made a comment to the artist privately. He went back to tattooing. Moved the skin apart at one point. And without a doubt several inches of untattooed skin. The client never noticed. I stopped working there not too long after that. Not for this reason. I've always felt so bad for that guy. Once had a client call the shop who was crying hysterically because, according to her, I had done her tattoo backwards. It took a few minutes to get her to calm down to the point where we realized she was looking at it in the mirror. She apologized and hung up. Edit. Thanks for the upvotes and awards. You're all too kind. Second edit. The tattoo was on her back. When I placed the stencil and finished the tattoo, the client was using 2 mirrors. Handheld one and the wall mounted one. Using 2 mirrors. It looked correct, which it was. When she looked in just one mirror at home, it appeared backwards. The way a mirror works. I've never really made any big mistakes that garnered a reaction. But one of my clients has a tattoo from another artist in a local studio that says Gradad instead of Grandad. Tattoo artist here. Best case I ever saw. A guy came into our shop asking about a cover up. The tattoo wasn't done at our place. He had what we call a belly rocker. One of those lettering tattoos that arcs over the belly. Think Tommy Lee's Mayhem tattoo. Usually gothic font. Gangster type piece. He had beautifully executed. Bold. Black. Old English letters across his belly that were supposed to read. Scarred for life. Whoever did the tattoo, as well as the tattooed guy, had forgotten one of the letters. An R. This guy came in with scared for life on his belly. We showed him some cover-up options, including full torso, Japanese style bodysuit stuff. Someone may have joked about doing the old proofreading trick of just putting a little red arrow and adding the missing letter. I don't know who did the thing, but never saw him again after giving cost estimates for the giant cover-up 15 or so years ago. We still joke about this one. Misspelled the name Jamie. Jamie. I asked the client for the spelling and showed the client the laid out script before it was applied. So not my fault. The client was very disgusted with himself for not knowing how to spell the name of the woman he loved enough to show it on his skin for life. I felt sorry for the guy, so I offered him a cover up at an incredible discount, as well as the name Ray applied spelled correctly. Oh, semi-recently I did an armband of sheet music on this walk-in and I put one of the segments on upside down because I don't read music and it looked right. Client noticed when I was about halfway done with that segment. Luckily she was cool and just said she should have checked her stencil harder and shrugged it off. Moral of the thread here is double check any words or numbers. I watched my boss turn a stylized Tierney, mistress's name, into Diane, wife's name, once. I'd never believe it if I didn't see it with my eyes. As other artists have said, none besides some blowouts and wonky lines that were fixable when I was a new artist. But I've fixed some really FK'd up ones. Mostly spelling mistakes. Some terrible ones. But I had to do a cover up of one of the guy's son. The portrait was wonky and obviously done by a kitchen wizard. The worst part was that all the designs the scratcher did around it were for a girl. They weren't approved by the client. The scratcher that did it thought it was a little girl and did all kinds of pinks and hearts and bows in the hair and around it. The worst part. He wrote, "Daddy's girl." The lettering basically butted right up against the portrait on top and bottom, so just covering up the designs wasn't possible. It needed a full-on cover-up, which I would recommended regardless because of the shitty portrait by itself. So we covered it up with an approved design and he came back to my shop for my version of the hyper-realistic portrait of his son that he wanted. Got a small tattoo on my foot. As he was making a line I heard him say whoops. I now have a stray line that's jutting off away from the rest of the tat. Fortunately over time it has faded. But it's such a shitty tattoo. The whole thing is just the worst. It was only $60, so I didn't say anything. And just told myself one day I'd get it covered up by something better. Edit to add. The main reason I didn't complain is because the tattoo artist was, and still is, my best friend's neighbor. Wait, he messed it up and still charged you? That's awful. You're stuck with his mistake. Worst was when I just started out tattooing. A few months in I'm tattooing an old co-worker's wife and she's getting some Roman numerals, and before starting I ask her to triple check the numbers and she's like, yup, all good, let's do it. 1 hour after being done I receive a text from my old co-worker that one of the letters are wrong. That was a great week to be alive dealing with that anxiety. Unfortunately, during my apprenticeship I messed up plenty of tattoos. My mentor wouldn't exactly mentor me. He would pop in while I was tattooing, say nothing and leave, then give me advice after the fact, instead of giving me direction during the process so I wouldn't FCK things up. I wasn't allowed to buy machines. He was very old school. I had to build my own machine and needles. Well, I'm not mechanically inclined at all. So I constantly had machines on the fritz. Which of course affects everything. He also wouldn't give me a reliable power source. I had to use this massive ancient power source that was used by hospitals in what appeared to be the 80s. It would also go on the fritz, making at times my needles stop right in the skin, making me cut them. What a nightmare. This will be buried but it's worth a shot. I work at a tattoo shop with a few artists. One of our artists f'd up tremendously on a face tattoo. She did the stencil beforehand and showed him. After his approval she started above his brow. He wanted curse but he left the shop with custard tattooed on his forehead. He was pissed of course. Never saw him again. Dang. I'm late to the party. This didn't happen to me. But to an artist that used to work in the booth next to me. Some lady comes in and wants a pocket watch with roses in her arm. So my co-worker agrees to do it. The client specifically wanted the pocket watch to be stopped at 4:20. He draws it up for her right arm and she's so excited. But for some reason she decides to change it to the left arm last minute. No problem. He runs in the back to the printer to mirror the image. She loves it. And they slap the stencil on and start tattooing. And they're almost done. He realizes when they mirror the image. The clock doesn't say 4:20 anymore. It says 7:40. He doesn't know what to do besides finish the tattoo. When the client checks it out in the mirror, she doesn't notice and F-King loves it. The lady ended up coming back a few weeks later to say once again how much she loved it. I always wonder if she ever found out. Tattooing a kanji backwards. Client brought in the reversed image. I made a stencil and applied it and the client checked it in the mirror and gave the okay. Came back the next day claiming I did it wrong. I pulled the original out of my box and held it up next to the tattoo and said nope. That's what you brought in. Felt bad. But still laughed when she left. Long story short. You as a client are responsible for spelling. Tattoo artists are not cultural experts or professional grammar Nazis. You pick it. You just stick it. This happened back in 2012 when I was really new at this. I was tattooing a good friend of mine. He wanted a clock tattoo, my first one ever with Roman numerals, with a mask next to it. Once the drawing was done, we realized that the mask was not fitting properly on the leg, due to other tattoos he had. So I went to the printer and flipped the design, mirrored. Put it on the leg and it was more than perfect. I start the tattoo. We chat and then I'm done. He gets up and checks in the mirror to see the final result and he realized that the clock had the Roman numerals flipped. 3 was at 9. We both froze. Laughed it up and went back on the table to fix it. At the end, it turned out to be not as bad as I thought it would be. I'm late to the party. But my grandma passed away and I got her date of birth. Date of death. With a hummingbird and the phrase your wings were ready but my heart was not. So artist had it all drawn up. I approved it. She finished. I paid. And left. Got to my mom's. Showed her. She loved it. Posted a picture on Facebook. And 5 minutes later my cousin texts my mom about my grandma's date of birth. At that very moment I realized with horror that I had the wrong month in her date of birth. Apparently November is the 11th month. Not the 10th. Who knew Narayosu's copyright A-ring edits to add? I laughed as soon as I realized what had happened. My grandma would not have been pleased with me getting a tattoo in the first place. Even though I have others. So I take the mistake as her last. FCKU. Also. Mr. Comma. I've been tattooing for 17 years. One weird regret was covering up a swastika for a woman who, turned out, was still racist AF. I was probably on the 3rd sitting, full rib panel of a geisha holding a man's decapitated head, when I finally broached the subject of the original swastika. She said she was a skinhead back in the day BC of an abusive black stepdad. She then began to say a bunch of racist shit that I won't repeat. Basically, I helped a racist hide the fact she was a racist. My first cousin has been doing tattoos for almost 30 years and advertises free cover-ups for former racists, white supremacists who have turned their lives around. But he puts them through a test before he does the tattoo to make sure he's not just helping some awful person hide their views. I have no idea what his test is. That's great lol. Yeah. I got that racist tattoo because of this.